I acquired an intellectual appetite in the pursuance of a phrase I had posited. Is tradition a footprint of culture? As I engage my deductive and inductive skills regarding this question, I wondered whether these concepts were inextricably linked. And if the answer was yes, presumably the word tradition procedurally is likely to evoke different responses from different people regardless of their ethnicity, be it in the sphere of education, society, religion, politics, art, dress, music, or manners. Conceivably, these two constructs juxtaposed against each other creates space for a scholarly discourse. Given the implicit nature of the footprint of tradition, it seems to be about changelessness, a view espoused by William Deller. Such thinking sets the tone and tenor for this scholarly discourse. Antecedently, the same is supposed or proved as a basis of my argument. And it also places this for scholarly analysis in context. If my premise is true, then the conclusion must be true. Premise of my thesis, since culture and tradition are the hypothesis, which is contextualized within the precincts on whether tradition is a footprint of culture. From a historical perspective, a petrosomatogyph is a supposed image of parts of a human or animal body in rock. They occur all over the world, often functioning as an important form of symbolism used in religious and secular ceremonies such as the crowning of kings. Some are regarded as artifacts linked to saints or culture heroes. Footprints are the impressions or images left behind by a person walking or running. Hoofprints and paw prints are those left by animals with hoofs or paws rather than feet, while shoe prints is the specific term for prints made by the shoes. They may either be indentations in the ground or something placed onto the surface that was stuck to the bottom of the foot. A backway is set of footprints in soft earth left by a life form. Animal tracks are the footprints, hoofprints, or paw prints of an animal. Not to mention, traditions are a subject of study in several academic fields in social sciences, chiefly anthropology, archaeology, and biology, with somewhat different meanings in different fields. It is also used in varying contexts in other fields, such as history, psychology, and sociology. Social scientists and others have worked to refine the common sense concept of tradition, is to make it into a useful concept for scholarly analysis. In the 1970s and 1980s, a wide variety of social scientists have criticized traditional ideas about tradition. Tradition is one of the key concepts in anthropology. It can be said that anthropology is the study of tradition in traditional societies. There is, however, no theory of tradition, as for most anthropologists, the need to discuss what tradition is seems unnecessary, as defining tradition is both unnecessary and unimportant. Tradition is defined in biology as a behavioral practice that is relatively enduring, that is, performed repeatedly over a period of time, that is shared among two or more members of a group. That depends in part on socially aided learning for its generation in new practitioners and has been called a precursor to culture in the anthropological sense. Behavioral traditions have been observed in groups of fish, birds, and mammals. Groups of orangutans and chimpanzees in particular may display large numbers of behavioral traditions, and in chimpanzees, transfer of traditional behavior from one group to another has been observed. Such behavioral traditions may have evolutionary significance, allowing adaptation at a faster rate than genetic change. According to Vincent Douglas, in the field of museology and ethnomuseology, tradition refers to the belief systems, repertoire, techniques, style, and culture that is passed down through subsequent generations. Tradition in music suggests a historical context with which one can perceive distinguishable patterns, along with a sense of history. Traditions have a fluidity that causes them to evolve and adapt over time. While both musicology and ethnomusicology are defined by being the scholarly study of music, they differ in the methodology and subject of research. Anthony Giddens and others makes the assertion that the modern meaning of tradition evolved during the Enlightenment period in opposition to modernity and progress. As with many other generic terms, there are many definitions of tradition. The concept includes a number of interrelated ideas. The unifying one is that tradition refers to beliefs, objects, or customs performed or believed in the past, originating in it, transmitted through time by being thought by one generation to the next, and are performed or believed in the present. Philip Grenier, under the caption Culture and Society, espoused the view. Invention describes the process of creating something novel that has never been made before. A tradition, on the other hand, is a belief or behavior passed down within society over generations with origins in the past. Frank Sonnenberg online blog, under the caption 7 Reasons Why Traditions Are So Important. Traditions represent a critical piece of our culture. They help form the structure and foundation of our families and our society. They remind us that we are part of history that defines our past, shapes who we are today, and who we are likely to become. Verbalizing this process during the textual analysis, this methodology involves understanding language, symbols, and or pictures presented in this text to gain information regarding how people make sense of whether culture and tradition, as a phrase, are inextricably linked. Is communicated in life through life experiences. This text is tradition, a footprint of culture, becomes metaphoric, a visual, written, and spoken message which provides cues to ways through which this communication may be understood. Tradition history or tradition criticism is a methodology of biblical criticism that situates a text within a stream of a specific tradition in history and attempts to describe the development of the tradition over the course of time. Tradition criticism was developed by Hermann Gonkel. Tradition history criticism is a sister discipline of form criticism, also associated with Gonkel, who used the results of source and form criticism to develop the history of tradition interpretation. According to wikipedia.org, customary law is a recognized source of law within jurisdictions of the civil law tradition, where it may be subordinate to both statutes and regulations. Tradition history forces interpreters to consider the possibility that some texts may have been an oral prehistory. It also notes that past traditions were retold and used for a present purpose, that it was made real, vital, or relevant for fresh successive generation. Traditional society has often been contrasted with modern industrial society, with figures like Durkheim and Pierre Bourdieu stressing such polarities as community versus society or mechanical versus organic solidarity. While Claude Lévi-Strauss saw traditional societies as cold societies in that they refused to allow the historical process to define their social sense of legitimacy. Frederick Jameson saw the 20th century modernization as encountering two main kinds of traditional society: tribal, as in Africa, and bureaucratic imperial, as in China and India. But a much wider diversity of traditional societies has existed over time, a view espoused by M. Hart K. Weeks, eds. The term Western philosophy refers to the philosophical tradition that began in ancient Greece with the pre-Socratic philosophers and later with Socrates. It is what is generally meant by philosophy at most Western universities, though many include the study of Eastern traditions, according to philosophyindex.com, traditions Western. Traditional art, countable and uncountable, plural traditional arts, art that is a part of the culture of a group of people, skills and knowledge of which are passed down through generations from master craftsmen to apprentices. Art produced with real physical media as opposed to digital art. Coordinate term, digital art. Folk art covers all forms of visual art made in the context of folk culture. Definitions vary, but generally the objects have a practical utility of some kind, rather than being exclusively decorative. The makers of folk art are normally trained within a popular tradition, rather than in the fine art tradition of the culture. There is an overlap or contested ground with inexperienced art, but in traditional societies where ethnographic art is still made, that term is normally used instead of folk art. Tangible folk art includes objects which historically are created and used within a traditional community. Intangible folk arts include such forms as music, dance, and narrative structures. These vital and constantly reinvigorating artistic traditions are shaped by values and standards of excellence that are passed from generation to generation, most often within family and community, through demonstration, conversation, and practice, according to wikipedia.org. Folklore is the expressive body of culture shared by a particular group of people. It encompasses the transitions common to that culture, subculture, or group. These include oral traditions such as tales, proverbs, and jokes. They include material culture, ranging from traditional building styles to handmade toys common to the group. Folklore also includes customary lore, the forms and rituals of celebrations such as Christmas and weddings. Folklore is not something one can typically gain in a formal school curriculum or study in the fine arts. Instead, these traditions are passed along informally from one individual to another, either through verbal instruction or demonstration, according to wikipedia.org. Richard M. Dorson, in the context of verbal tradition, a German folk tale, Hansel and Gretel illustration by Arthur Rackham, 1909. The formal definition of verbal lore is words both written and oral that are spoken, sung, voice forms of traditional utterance that show repetitive patterns. Crucial. Here are the repetitive patterns. Verbal lore is not just any conversation, but words and phrases conforming to a traditional configuration recognized by both the speaker and the audience. For narrative types, by definition, have consistent structure and follow an existing model in their narrative form. It is what defines the group of people living in a certain area of the globe, or people who share a type of heritage. Tradition consists in the passing down of beliefs and practices from one generation to the next. For example, the fiddler on the roof is a metaphor for survival in a life of uncertainty. Precarious as a fiddler on the roof tried to search out a pleasant, simple tune without breaking his neck. The fiddler also represents that tradition that Teve sings of in the opening number, the traditions that Teve is trying to hold on to. The story centers on Teve, the father of 5 daughters, and his attempt to maintain his Jewish religious and cultural traditions as outside influences encroach upon the family's lives. He must cope both with the strong-willed actions of his 3 older daughters who wish to marry for love. Each one's choice of a husband moves further away from the customs of their Jewish faith and heritage, and with the edict of the Tsar that evicts the Jews from their village, according to Wikipedia.org wiki. It refers to everything from what they ate, who they prayed to, how they dance, what type of music they make, their social habits, their superstitions, and their set of values. In some cases, the behavior of members within certain cultural groups can be predicted, depending on how closely that person sticks to cultural patterns. However, a rough generalization of this theory leads to the creation of stereotypes. It can be practiced and passed down between 2 people, personal tradition. Within a small group, family tradition. Within a community, town tradition. Or within an entire society, country tradition. Global media, such as the internet, have been seen as effective means of recreating traditional cultures. However, a key contrast now with traditional societies as they were is that participation has become voluntary instead of being ascriptive, fixed in space, social stratification, and role expectations, a view espoused by Peter Worsley, ed. The New Modern Sociology Readings, 1991, page 317. Traditions can be very punctual, or they can dictate the way people behave on an occasion. For example, it can be a tradition to greet people in a certain way on the morning of a national holiday. On the other hand, traditions can also dictate what to wear, what to do, and what to eat on a religious holiday, according to difference.guru. The main difference between culture or tradition is that culture is the ideas, duties, and social behavior of a particular generation, whereas tradition is the transmission of a particular customs and beliefs from one generation to another, according to www.difference.wiki. Now that I have juxtaposed culture against tradition, I have discovered that culture, according to difference.guru, is a body of knowledge comprising language, art, clothing, and traditions. Tradition is a set of rituals practiced by a group of people. Culture defines human behavior in a specific space. Tradition dictates human behavior on a specific occasion. Culture defines the character of the people raised with specific cultural beliefs. Tradition can be practiced or not practiced by individuals. Culture is seen as a whole. Tradition is more related to a specific event. Culture is a complex concept that incorporates the combination of a people's beliefs, knowledge, and traditions. In summary, these concepts are inextricably linked, and they do evoke different responses from different people who occupy various cultural geographical space. In the sphere of education, society, religion, politics, art, dress, music, or manners, the main difference between the doctrine of the footprint of tradition and culture is that culture is the ideas, duties, the social behavior of a particular generation, whereas tradition is the transmission of a particular customs and beliefs from one generation to another. The positive phrase, "Is tradition a footprint of culture?" engaged my deductive and inductive skills. Whether these concepts were inextricably linked or not did not conflate the issue, but create a space for a scholarly discourse. This text, "Is Tradition a Footprint of Culture?" is captured in 28 chapters and verbalized in 886 pages in ISBN 978-976-9651272. Traditions are a footprint and part of culture.